Thank you for joining us. This is a workshop dedicated to dealing with parental conflict and supporting child development. The main focus then of today is to tell you all a little bit more about parenting apart. Hopefully on the screen in front of you, you can see the fabulous Kaur and her colleague Claire Field. So Claire is the MD of Parenting Apart, and she's going to tell you a little bit about her experience as part of the seminar. Cam is a senior social worker and she has worked for Parenting Apart for a number of years. And part of Cam's role today will also be to tell you a little bit about the framework that they work within and the research that backs up that framework, to give you all some confidence in understanding about the focus and ethos of the work of Parenting Apart. Last but by no means least, on your screen is Michele Friele. For those of you that don't know her, Michele is a very experienced private law children barrister. I only had actually the pleasure of meeting her a couple of months ago, and the pleasure means that I got to Google her, and Googling her tells me that Chambers considers her to be absolutely outstanding. So I'm going to make Michele blush on a Monday afternoon. And thank her very much for joining us. So Michele will just be talking to you a little bit about her experience of Parenting Apart. Finally, I'm absolutely actually conscious that I didn't introduce myself. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Claudia Gilham. I'm a principal associate here at Mills and Reeve. So the rest of the seminar is pretty much going to be about Cam and Claire talking to you about Parenting Apart, and then some questions towards the end of the seminar. Please do ask those questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom link. And then hopefully we will get around to asking Cam and Claire those questions in due course. And then I've also been asked for a technical point of view to remind you that if you click your Zoom into speaker view, you are going to get to see the most of Cam and Claire that is possible. Cam, over to you.
Hello everybody, it's actually Claire that's going to speak first. So I'm Claire Field, and I'm sure most people have heard of my name, if not met me in some of the region of the family law. Certainly we're trying to help parents who are stuck in the middle of conflict and have children hanging on by their fingernails and really do need some help. A lot of people ask me, why do I do what I do, and how important this is to me. And that's very much from my own experience. My childhood, unfortunately, with my sister, was born out of sheer terror a lot of the time, and also really just the uncertainty. We never knew what one day to the next was going to bring. And even though I'm only 21, I can still remember that feeling at 9. I just don't want to allow or wish children to feel like that. So the whole moral of and the principle of why we do what we do is to really help the mums and dads that perhaps do struggle and obviously decide to divorce or separate, and the impact and the trauma that can bring on children when unfortunately they stop being the parents that they perhaps wish to be, because obviously through emotions it becomes very highly vented with a lot of frustration and anger. And for children to witness and to see and to hear this, we know it can have a huge impact. So absolutely 100%, my, I suppose, core and principle is, if we really, really want to help children, then we really, really, really need to help the parents first and foremost. Because if we can help the parents, even with a decision to divorce or separate, still to continue to be the best parents they possibly can be with a significant change that's taken place, but most importantly, to allow and to continue the children to have a relationship with both parents and to continue to have the love and security of them, then we know that they will be fine. Without that, then really the children have very little hope of continuing to grow and to develop, and certainly into young adulthood, being able to actually have those relationships themselves. The Parenting Apart programme, absolutely, I see, is very much and should be prioritised as an early intervention. Really, because on the sight of things going wrong, then, you know, it is important that we can reach out and help parents. So offering the Parenting Apart programme as an early intervention throughout the legal system and the public sector, we know can significantly improve outcomes for both adults and children. I'd like to talk a little bit about our ethos, theory and approach, and really who are our practitioners. The Parenting Apart practitioners are very specifically trained and qualified to work with children and adults. The practitioners must have over 2 years of experience working within a health and social care organisation where they've worked with parents and children in conflict and have knowledge in child development, the attachment theory, enhanced safeguarding training for children, and also direct work with children and adults together. DBS certified must, and all practitioners have to attend the 3-day training to learn about the structured intervention. Our licensed practitioners typically come from a range of professional backgrounds from the health and social care sector, such as social workers, health professionals, counsellors, psychologists, and mental health practitioners. Parenting Apart team comprises of 5 staff that deliver the intervention, and we've also been subcontracted by CAFCAS through the Child Action North in West Midlands, which is really exciting. And we're just now starting to receive referrals and really being able to help parents again in very entrenched situations. We also have independent licensed practitioners that have been trained since June. And as you can see, just from some of the areas that we've got listed here, it's actually now allowing further practitioners to be able to deliver and to offer the intervention in a bigger scale, and in actually one in Dublin. So that was really exciting. Dr. Paul Gaffner, who we met over a couple of years ago now, good old LinkedIn, but we've had quite a number of meetings, and he absolutely wants to become our leader in Northern Ireland to actually help put and implement the Parenting Apart programme in Ireland. And also Bernardo's have expressed an interest in delivering the Parenting Apart in Wales. We've just recently partnered with 5 local authorities to deliver the Parenting Apart as an early intervention to reduce interparental conflict. And as you can see, the local authorities are just listed below on the screen. And just before I hand over to Cam, it is really important to understand that the training is a big part of really what I call prioritising the outcomes for families, because the programme will only be as good as the practitioner delivering it. And that's where I also want to raise the awareness and how important frontline practitioners are today when they are actually supporting parents together in quite high levels of conflict. It's not an easy task. It's something that you have to be well versed and skilled in to be able to sit completely impartial, but most importantly, to get the voice and the emotional needs of their children across to them. So to every practitioner out there doing this role, 10 out of 10, and you deserve a medal.
Thank you, Claire. We sound like newsreaders here, don't we? Let me get my script out. I think it's really important for people to understand where we've developed the evidence around our programme. And this study, the Millennium Cohort, was quite an interesting study because it found that parental separation led to 16% of increase in emotional problems and 8% rise in behavioural dysregulation and difficulties for children between the ages of 7 and 14. The Mooney research was quite relevant because it was a research of family breakdown from around the world, and it evidenced that positive adjustment to family breakdown can be achieved when parents are in good mental health, there is low parental conflict and cooperative parenting post-separation, and good quality relationship with the non-resident parent. This kind of mirrors a lot of the evaluation that we've recently done, and what we've able to establish through some of the evaluation that we've done is that it improves communication between parents. We have a very child-centered approach by helping parents to prioritise the emotional needs and the voice of the child throughout the process. reduces the length of time of court process, and proceedings can be highly traumatic and can have significant emotional and mental health impact on children. It gives back parents the control and responsibility of making decisions about the future of their children, and it supports parents and children to re-establish a relationship through parental conflict. These are just been some of the benefits that we've established through doing some of the research. And one of the significant things is that it continues to promote relationship between children and parents and significantly reduces parental stress for the parents and the length of time that children are in the court process, and re-establish relationship with parents at the earliest opportunity. Our social impact report that we completed in 2019 identified that every couple that we worked with, there was a public saving of over 31,000. So every pound that we spent on our programme, there was a social return of £46.52 generated from the public spending. We recently, last year, during the COVID, we were very lucky that National Lottery supported us to support some very low-income families who were really hard to reach. What we established through this, that the report also highlighted that Parenting Apart programme had been used as a last resort for many when it felt it was really needed to be the first resort, as the parents who engaged in the intervention had long established conflict and difficulty community. We've also been recognised recently on the Centre of Innovation of Justice. What they do is they identify innovative justice programmes within the family justice systems. They also support the drug and alcohol courts, and they are delighted to map us alongside those services. Just to tell you a little bit about some of the theories that underpin our work, which is really based on scientific evidence as identified by Professor Gordon Harold, who's leading in parental conflict and also part of the Early Intervention Foundation. He says that where we are developing interventions, where we are dealing with parental conflict, it's really important for us to focus on child development, trauma and attachment theory, adverse childhood experiences, the application of conflict and communication theories, evidence-based practice from the field of couple and family therapy, and developing positive relationships and strengths-based communication between parting parents. The ethos around our programme is really focusing the parental mind so that they can centre their conflict away from themselves and centre it around the children, by prioritising the physiological and the emotional needs of the children. So I'm just going to go on to a little bit explaining about the different interventions, because I think this is quite important for you as the legal sector. The Parenting Apart programme can be accessible prior, during and post-court proceedings. The 4-week intervention, which is normally offered to parents prior to court or following the first hearing. The 4-week intervention is not appropriate for families where there's ongoing safeguarding concerns, domestic abuse, parental substance use, mental health, or any other, because these interventions need high intensity work with parents. Also, the 4-week intervention is not really appropriate where there's ongoing court proceedings, because that can cause more confliction within the family environment, or where there's a child who's really resistant into having contact, because we need to do some more work with the child and the parent relationship. Where those things exist, what we do is we offer an 8-week intervention, which is often appropriate for families when they're going through the dispute resolution hearing, and also where there's been a Section 7 report or other expert reports have been considered, so that the voice of the child can be held at central. The 12-week intervention is normally following a fact-finding hearing, or where there's real high levels of child resistance within the contact, because we need to do some real intensive support between the parent and child. And we often get commissioned through the local authorities to a lot of this work. Our work can run alongside the court proceedings, and we can offer an overview of the intervention, which identifies where the conflict is and what are the stuckness within the family environment. And we would only offer a report providing that is instructed through the court. So what we do is, before parents come on the programme, we always say to the referrer, get each parent to come to us, speak to us individually. We offer them a free 30-minute consultation. We also offer free consultations to professionals, especially the legal sector, when they want an initial case discussion, when they're in court, to think, is our programme appropriate? And then we can send them an outline of schedule of work, which can be submitted to court. These are just some of the steps just to help you understand how we work. So before our parents can enter into the programme, we do a full risk assessment. That involves getting access to all the information. So we will contact CAFCAS if that's needed, if there's a social worker on the case, if we need to access any reports or psychological assessments. The next stage is normally the individual meetings. Now that sometimes happens, sometimes we do one individual meeting with parents, sometimes we do two, depending on what level of intervention they need. We then follow it up with 3 joint meetings. We always do 3 joint meetings with the parents so that we can understand whether they have the ability and the capacity to work towards a joint parent working agreement. And then what we do is we formalise a parent working agreement so that we can start planning of how they start doing the contact arrangements. Post the programme, we do offer parents review meetings and also additional support where we need to go out and do some practical help, such as transitions or additional child consultations, or even in some cases where we might need to do some emotional regulation work with one parent or parenting tips, so we can understand what's required for that family. We often talk about apart as not being apart. At Parenting Apart, we help parents to form, we encourage connective parenting through helping parents to accept and acknowledge their wishes and children's wishes and feelings. Positive participation in the child's life. They are accessible and available to the care of their children. They are attuned to the children's needs and emotions. They are responsive and sensitive to the children's needs. Parents learn to develop trust in the relationship to enable their children to feel safe and secure. So how do we help the parents to move from their personal relationship to one of where they can focus on their child? So we really talk about child development, and at the very early stages of the programme, we'll really focus on their child's relationship with the parent. What happened during those very crucial days when they were together, and what kind of relationship they had with their children, so that we can begin to establish some of those early experiences of the child. Attachment is a very, very important theory that we use within our programme, because attachment helps us to highlight the importance of the child's emotional bond with their primary caregivers. We focus on the first 1001 days of the child's life to understand the child's attachment, and we try to look at any disruption or loss of this bond and how this could have affected the child emotionally, physiologically, because it impacts them into their adult and have an impact into their future relationships. Relationships are everything, and that's what we teach our parents, because as parents, they need to provide the security. And I love Balby's quote on this, and how parents are, I can't really see what I'm saying, written, sorry, it's got off my screen. Security in relationship is one of the greatest gifts we can receive from our parents. And we help parents to understand why relationships are important, as their children require a secure base which is reliable, predictable and consistent. Children will learn to build and maintain positive relationships with others, and their parents are the teachers and their role models. We really talk about this because we really think that children can achieve their full potential into adulthood, we help the parents to focus on love and belonging. Because if children can't feel love and belonging, the impact of conflict will follow them through their adulthood. We focus on the adversity and the trauma. So we really look at the protective factors in the family so that we can bring down the risk factors. So we look at all the protective factors, such as additional family members, other relationships, who else in the family can support with some of those transitions, so we can really increase some of those risks within the family environment. Behaviour is a communication. We really help parents to really focus on their non-verbal behaviour, because that's what children really look at. They often don't understand what their parents are arguing about. Often children will just think that their parents are arguing about them, but actually they're arguing amongst themselves. So children will always pick up the body language, the facial expressions, the tone. And if all they're hearing is bickering and arguing, children become very dysregulated. So through our programme, we really help the parents to think about how they talk to each other and how they respond to each other. We think about conflict as conflict is both a behaviour and a communication of unmet need. So how do we look at this? We look at the destructive and the constructive nature of their communication and what do they bring to the table. And we really highlight that to the parents, how hard it is for them to come out of this pattern of destructive relationship, to manoeuvre them into a constructive way of communicating. How do we do that? So when we're in our sessions, we start noticing what is constructive and what is destructive. So we look at when parents are discussing or when they're blaming each other. We look at when they're debating or when they're accusing, when they're trying to work it out and when they're trying to break it down. We look at who's the dominant person in the session so that each parent has an equal voice within our meetings. We position ourselves and we challenge them in a gentle way. We remain neutral and curious throughout our work. And what we try to do is set some real clear rules and boundaries so that we can navigate away from this conflicting relationship. Alongside validating parents' experience, because it's so hard for them, they're so entrenched in this, they're so emotional around this. What we try and do alongside this is gently challenge them as well when they are getting it wrong or when they go into that destructive place again. So we try and challenge them in the most constructive way, if I can say. A lot of our parents that come from the private law proceedings don't tend to have the high level of safeguarding concerns as our cases within the public sector cases, but we really do home in on the emotional harm, and we really help parents to think about how they are emotionally harming their children if they don't get this right. We use general therapeutic principles such as empathy, congruence, and we tend to hold a very non-judgmental role. We don't get into the parents' battle. So when one parent is saying, well, you know, he did this or she did this, it is not our place to tell which parent who is right and wrong. What we do is we help them to manage that conflict, and we stay quite neutral by being empathic in their process. The voice of the child is central to everything that we do. Every time we hold the wishes, wants and worries and the well-being of their child, and we consistently remind them through the process, what do you think your child would be feeling now? Tell me what they would be saying if they were sitting here and heard you both talk. So it's really important they understand that, because if they don't understand that, they'll fall back into the pattern of conflict. How do we do that? We get the parents to sit in the voice of, well, we get the parents to sit into the shoes of their children. So we remind them what it must have been like for them. Tell me about the time when you were first at school. Tell me about your journey as a child so I can help, so they can begin to sit into their child's journey. And we really help them to think about what their child wants from them as parents. If our parents can't do that, we see that as a risk, because if the parents cannot shift away from that, then what we are doing is really emotionally harming their children. How do we change the mindset? So we educate the parent. So we tell them about child development. We tell them about the adversity. We tell them about what safe relationships that their children need, so that they can start looking at the impact of divorce and how high parental conflict begins to emotionally impact. So we bring the statistics out for them. We give them the information so they can really understand that, so that parents can begin to recognise what is at stake and the importance of getting this right now, because otherwise it will affect the children in their future. Relationship. We try to build a relational trust and mutual respect. We don't try and build what we know is that a lot of the parents that come to us, they've lost trust. They don't know how to trust each other. So we don't focus on trust. What we do is we help the parents to focus and feel confident that the other parent will keep your child safe and raise them well. So we talk about their parenting strengths and abilities and their capacities to parent. At the end of the work, what we do is we really focus on the child. So we look at what would an overnight stay look like? What does time together for a child looks like? Important celebrations, birthdays, religious events, grandparents, extended family, holidays, school arrangements. And we put that in a very structured plan, which outlines to the parents when they're seeing the children, when they're not seeing the children, and what do they have to do together to co-parent. How do parents enter into the programme? Often our referrals come from solicitors. We also get a lot of referrals from local authorities, independent social workers, NIAS, psychologists who have already done psychological assessments, and also CAFCAS. The programme can be offered. We want every parent to go to mediation. If mediation doesn't work, then we feel that we might be the next route to help them move away from this court process and also get into an arrangement where they can start co-parenting. The parent working agreement can be ratified and be taken to court as part of the parent working agreement, and the parents can also contact the programme directly or through an intermediary. I'd just like to bring your attention to how we use the Our Family Wizard app. What we do, we can't always control what happens inside. We can only control what happens inside our sessions, but we can't always control what happens outside. So we always encourage our parents to go on the Family Wizard app so that they can start developing constructive relationships. And that's it. I'm going to pass you over to Claire, who's going to give you a little case study.
Hi, me again. Just want to run through just 2 case studies so you get a feel of what sort of help we can offer parents. The parents I'm going to talk about first and foremost had actually just entered into the court arena, and they'd actually on their referral had separated in March, and they were looking at having a pre-trial review listed in the court on the 12th and the 13th of May, and obviously to discuss childcare arrangements order or application. They both agreed that they would then actually come and attend initially the initial 4-week programme. They'd actually heard, well, the father had heard it being mentioned by another barrister who then actually said, this is who we're contacting, have a chat to them. So they actually made the referral in, and they first sat down, and within in the first joint meeting, they realised that if they don't really change and manage this level of conflict, the harm that it had already exposed their eldest child to was going to have very dramatic effects. By the time they'd finished the 4-week intervention, they actually agreed that they now, and they'd actually put it into the court, we both wish to withdraw this application and replace with a proposal for the parenting apart to continue, which will be an agreement between the parties and hopefully be able to support the family back into a more positive place. And this will also hopefully stop the fact-finding hearing as agreed, and also hopefully we can actually file an agreed schedule of admissions because they're going to a fact-finding. They worked hard, absolutely, 100%. But what we also found is that by helping them to sit down and to really look at it from the child's perspective, and also communication is crucial, of course it is, but it's how we talk to each other. It's how we are to be able to get over across how we feel. So in the case study here, I took it really very much as I do in most of my cases, is I actually show them. And that's not because I know it all, because I don't, and I don't want to even pretend to. But I know that if I don't give parents an additional skill of actually how to talk through the conflict or even some of the triggers, then this is something that's going to be short-lived. So they went back into court and they actually agreed that they would sign off their admissions. They would never bring this back into court. It was a done deal, but they both agreed then to continue with another 8-week period of parenting apart, but also some family therapy where I could internally put a referral through to Kaur, who is a family therapist as well, to really offer the parents the most important part as well, consistency of care and support. They didn't have to have a break in a long period. They were left to obviously make appointments with Cam, speak to Cam, which they did, but also to really want to highlight some of the past historic issues that could easily rise again. So Cam did her interventions, and alongside that, I then supported father, which the court asked through the agency to, be in charge of, really, was the supportive contact between father and the children, which we did. And again, very positively got parents co-parenting, even to visits within the park and also within the family home. So it's very positive for the children. It was certainly very safe. And also we were able to involve other family members to continue that support whilst the parents were recovering. I would like to say that this is not, happens this often, but it happened on this occasion. The fact that we were managed to, I feel, get in pretty quick to the help and the support these parents needed, and also to realise, and also the children's needs. They have actually decided to rip up their divorce papers, throw them in the bin, and put their time and effort in back to being a family. And that's a lovely, lovely place to be. That's what's happening. I'm not saying it's for everybody. My second case study, just to say, is that I had a referral from a barrister, and basically family had been in entrenched place and court proceedings for over 4 years. And she actually said to me, if you can sort this one out, Claire, you're a miracle worker. Well, I'm not a miracle worker. And I say to my parents, I'm not Nanny McPhee, and I haven't got my magic wand. But what I have got is the patience and understanding. And at times, even when we guide and support parents and help them, they also need to at times be challenged, because obviously the long-term effect it has on children. So these two parents, even though I couldn't meet them at first face-to-face, because this is fairly recent and through the COVID, which is obviously extremely more different to actually seeing parents face-to-face, we actually put the consultations through remote. And I must admit, it wasn't as easy, but it was done. And we got the parents into a much, much more secure place, where eventually we were allowed to do some community outings with social distancing for the children, which we could obviously reassure the children that both parents now have said to them. Met this funny lady called Claire, who specialises in helping mummies and daddies to talk. She's banged our heads together. We're really sorry, and we want to start to make this better. So 4 years entrenched processes and also lots of different people, and they had 8 weeks of me, which is probably long enough for anybody, really. And I'd probably be shaking every time I get this woman. I do say to the parents, you don't want me forever, do you? But the difference that it's happened for the children, and also most important for the parents, because again, it is finding the better way. So those are just 2 little case stories, in the sense that we don't form miracles, we can't help everybody, but wherever there's an opportunity where parents have stopped communicating and really have lost the insight at the moment to continue their good journey of parenting, then please pick the phone up and see if we can help. Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you ever so much, Claire. I'm just conscious then we have a question in our question and answer box, but there's actually a couple of questions I'd like to ask you both that kind of occur to me from what you've said. If I may then, so Claire, you talked about the first case, and I'm just conscious in that case, the framework, wasn't there a particular agreement that the parents almost kind of wouldn't report back, that they would use this process as a kind of safe space? Do you want to just talk a little bit about how kind of creative you can be in trying to bring parents back from those entrenched spaces?
Yes, absolutely. I think in order for parents to change the mindset, and most importantly from a personal relationship into some sort of respectful parent working relationship, there has to be a line drawn from the issues of what's probably caused the heightened emotion. So on this case, my first case study, there were allegations from both parents of some sort of domestic abuse to each other, and also very much from, I suppose, they were blaming each other and trying to upscale the blame in these allegations. So I very calmly, but also with other professionals involved, got them to really look at where and how these had come from. And a lot of it was, in a sense, through heightened conflict, arguments, and really where they were just being aggressive towards one another, which in all fairness, Claudia, as Cam and I discuss quite regular, we can all shout and we can all fall out. But it's to what level and to what degree that happens and the frequency. I think they both then realised that the fact that the court process absolutely is there to help protect children, of course, absolutely. But was it really something that these children needed protecting on, rather than the parents taking some responsibility? And in fact, half and half, they can do things differently, and to take that risk away. So by talking with them and also referring them into further therapeutic, individual emotional readiness to really look at those triggers, and also most importantly to apologise to the children.
I think also as well, Claudia, one of the things that we really do is when I was talking about the emotional harm, I mean, these parents were highly intellectual, one was a GP, one was a solicitor, like Claire said, so they really understood in the sense of that. But also we really reflected on what that harm looks like and what was the threshold for that harm. Because I think sometimes a lot of the cases within private law proceedings, if we look at the threshold of harm, sometimes it's not as high as when we look at local authority threshold of harm. I mean, I've worked in local authorities, and some of the cases that I'm working with in private law proceedings, what is identified as safeguarding concern would nowhere near touch a local authority case threshold. So we really look at those risks with the parents. So what we try to do is help them to look at what are the risks and what are the safety measures that we can put in if they perceive that as being a risk. So we hold them and contain them through that process as well, and that makes a real difference.
Thank you ever so much, Cam. Michele, I'm conscious that I think you might be having technical difficulties, but how are you getting on? Because I just wanted to ask you, given Cam and Claire have talked about the kind of engagement they see from parents, what your experience has been to those that you advise that have engaged in the Parenting Apart programme.
Yeah, I think the question you were just asking about, you can be very creative with the Parenting Apart programme. And so in one of the cases I did, there was a concern that parents would use it as a mechanism to take the matter back to court rather than it being a way of keeping parents out of court. And so it was agreed with Claire that any work that they would undertake would be confidential. Normally it isn't, obviously, save for the usual safeguarding issues. Claire and Cam would also always have to deal with that. And so that was a really creative way and gave both of the parents confidence that they could work with the programme without worrying about what they said or what they did and it being reported back to solicitors and then one parent being dragged immediately back to court. So I thought that was a really good way of using it. But other parents that I've been in cases with, and they are usually the high conflict private law cases, have found it enormously helpful to go on the course, and it really has changed the way that they look at their own behaviour rather than it being about blaming the other parent. I do think the work that Claire does really shows to parents that they have to take responsibility individually and stop just simply blaming each other, which is what we as lawyers spend our time in private law proceedings doing, trying to prove that it's all one parent rather than our clients. So I'm a huge fan of it. The local judges are an absolute huge fan of it. They take very little persuading when parents say they'll agree to it and there's funding in place. Judges take virtually no persuading to say that is what we should do. We either stall the proceedings, adjourn them whilst that course takes place, or in the best case scenario, we would get parents to withdraw proceedings so that they can go and just completely focus on what's a very positive programme for them.
Excellent. All right, thank you. I'm conscious then that we'll probably start bringing things to a conclusion shortly, just for those who are very kindly still listening. I wanted to say one thing before I ask my final question, which is just to say to all those that are listening that you will separately receive an email which sets out in more detail the programmes and the cost of the programmes. Because I get the sense that you might all be sitting there thinking, this is all great, but if I'm not going to get funding for it, how much does it cost? So that kind of detail we will send out separately for people, but obviously focusing now on getting the benefit of kind of Cam and Claire's view. I wanted then to take to one of the questions that one of the participants has asked, which is broadly, but what do you do if one parent wants to attend parenting part and the other doesn't? Do you have any suggestions? Is there anything you can do in those circumstances?
Well, I often get asked that, and we try and establish, Claudia, with that, what are the difficulties and the barriers for the other parent in respect of that. I have on some occasions where I've worked with one parent, and that's because I've helped that parent to re-establish their relationship with their child. So I use a technique called non-violence resistance, which is a connected parenting therapeutic approach. So what we do is we help that parent to re-establish ways of communicating with that child, but equally helping them to understand how do they communicate. Because if I become less controlling in the way that I respond to another, I really focus on how they are communicating with the other parent. And what you find is a real change occurs, because if I don't get into the conflict, then what are we arguing about? So if I change my behaviour, there's a possibility there's going to be a change in the behaviour from the other parent. And often the resistance is normally because we get lots of parents like that. Well, they'll ring us up and say, I want to join this. We will contact the other parent where we've had a referral form, and we will speak to the other parent. And because it's passed through the solicitor, what we say to a lot of the solicitors is actually get your parent to ring us. We will send the information to the parent and get the parent to send the information to the other parent, because it's them that wants to do the work, not the solicitors, not the court. We want the parents to want to do this so they can get that individual advice, and they're not thinking that, oh, we're aligned to one solicitor or the other, or because one solicitor's saying this, oh, there's a benefit to that parent. No, we're not here for the parents. We're here for the children. And we make that very clear to the parents as well. You're not our client. Your child is our client.
Yeah, and I think also, Claudia, just on that, even when cases come into court, if parents obviously, again, financially say, look, we don't want a court report, we just want to be able to put a parent working agreement together, that's also accepted by the court, because, again, they can't be enforcing financial pressures on parents. But if they can come back with a parent working agreement, And 9 times out of 10, they agree to say that if either parent says, can we go and have a coffee with Cam, Steve, Alfred, Claire, whoever, one of the team, it's written in that the other parent says yes without even asking. So it's a safety net. We become a safety net. So it's a bit like an MOT, how we do it, because family life changes all the time. You know, one parent might meet somebody else and it all starts. But it's a really nice place for parents to know, even if they'd seen me to begin with, you know, Cam's not going to be any different to me in a sense of helping them come, sit, talk, and let's have a look at it. And I think it's a real benefit.
And also, Claudia, on our team, we do have male members as well, because sometimes our fathers feel a little bit intimidated, do you know what I mean? Or sometimes they feel that, the court arena is very focused on mothers. So we work with, you know, we have got male practitioners as well, because it really supports and makes that diversity within our team, within that sense as well.
Brilliant, thank you ever so much. I suppose that leads me then just to say, for those that I have invited from kind of the Yorkshire circuit, to say that actually you do have a practitioner based in Leeds, don't you? I think it's Dr.
Yes,
Paul
we do.
Walton.
Yeah.
So he can work face to face with people. And I think actually I'm going to conclude, Cam, with what you said, which I really liked, which was the comment that the parents aren't the clients, but the child is.
Yes.
You know, that really reigns true with me from what you guys have said over the last 6 months that I've met you. That focus is just absolutely razor sharp, and it's very impressive.
Thank you, Claudia. But I do honestly believe that's why we get the results we do, because if you bring the reality to the table, if you really, really love your children, which they do, and we say, do you love your children? Yes, we do. Then you want the best for them. Of course you do. Well, then you at least need to care for what they love. And believe it or not, they love mommy and daddy. So.
And also, Claudia, they're only in court because of the children, not because of their financial arrangements.
Thank you ever so much for listening. My apologies, I think I've actually got an echo on my line, so I'm going to be as quick as I possibly can. It's just to say a couple of things. As I said, you will get a follow-up email after this. It will provide you with a recording of this seminar, but it will also provide you with some more paperwork ultimately about parenting apart, costs, and obviously the related framework. And then just to ask, there is some feedback questions at the end of this seminar. They're not the normal, they're not just what did you think? They are questions that we'd really like to hear from you about with regards to what power do you think the judiciary should have with courses like this? And you know, would you sign up to education and training courses that you felt provided this information to both you and your clients? So thank you very much for joining, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you all.